Whenever there's a vacuum, it's going to be filled with something. And oftentimes, like partying or these types of things it's because there's a vacuum. We're going to fill it with whatever that thing is. But intentions, and what we felt at that Mycelium festival was a festival filled with intentions. A lot of people had put work and time and effort into thinking about how are you going to feel on this day and this time, and being inside of that structure is actually gives you the freedom to be so many different types of things. But simply like walking into a vacuum of, an empty Friday and Saturday night can be really fun and exciting, but perhaps after some time is going to start to, be filled with more toxic things or not your true self.
Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to It's the Bearded Man podcast with your favorite, the world's favorite bearded man, Bobbbaaaay. Each week with our guest episodes, I try to put the spotlight on someone who in my eyes has given themselves permission to live a life authentic to them. Our guest today is from Batavia, Illinois. He's the world's first party coach, where he helps people approach their social life from a mindful and intentful angle. He's the founder of Club 7 Van, a 7-week group coaching program for music lovers, sales teams, or any weekend warriors. He's also a professional morning coach to help you optimize your mornings while holding you accountable for the day ahead. Today on the podcast, fellow bearded brother. I think it's coming in right now. Sometimes he's got the mustache rocking and rolling. Today on the podcast, Evan Cudworth, baby.
Amazing. Thank you so much for having me. Always a pleasure to share some space with my ginger bearded brothers. Yeah.
Very, very ginger bearded men. Evan, I have to tell this first story, and I told you this when we went on the run a couple weeks ago, but I think first impressions are a big thing, right? There's just something about it, and I never judge a book by its cover, right? So I never judge somebody's first impression and think, this is who they are. I just, it's your first taste of somebody. I will never forget walking into Mycelium Fest of August of last year. I've never met you before. This is a festival of 250 people. I, myself, and a couple other people that I was rolled there with were very much on the earlier side for the check-in. I think at the time we were maybe the 20th people to check in, and I get there and I see this pool deck afar. There's nobody up there except you. You are dressed, you are ready, and it's 2:00 in the afternoon. There's nobody there, and you are already dancing away. And I immediately was just like, who is this guy? And what type of weekend am I getting myself into? Because I had never been to anything like that before. And I think it just spoke so loudly to you about the self-love you have for yourself, and also the confidence where nobody was there, but you were still having a good time. And I want to say, man, that really set the bar for meeting you and just now seeing you, from afar these last 6+ months of like who Evan really is, man.
That means a lot, man. I appreciate that. It's always, the dance floor has been my home for the last 15 years in many ways. It didn't always used to be that way. I think I'm a little older than you, but I remember in high school, like in the 8th grade dances, like, the girls would be on the dance floors, like we'd be in the gym, like playing basketball or whatever, right? It was like not cool to dance. And something shifted a little bit around like college, and you could start to do a little bit more. I joined a fraternity, and I remember, one of the things we would do in pledging is they would put on Journey's Don't Stop Believing as we were 2 kegs deep, and like shirtless bros up on a table, just screaming Journey and dancing. And then what really switched it for me, I remember, is somebody like switched on I Just Can't Wait to Be King from The Lion King. And then we really started going, and we're all like dancing and just going back and forth. And like, when I think back on like when I am my fullest self, it's in those moments where it's tribal, man. Like when you're with other people and you get to express yourself in your way with your body, like there's very few places that we allow ourselves to be that type of vulnerable. And every time I get a chance to do that on the dance floor, brings me a little bit closer to like why I believe humans are on this planet. So that I inspired you a little bit in that way is amazing. My question back to you is, stepping
Here we
into
go.
that.
He's already going to flip the script.
Oh, of course. But stepping into that type of environment, because that festival was just one of the best experiences I've had. I've been to over 100 festivals, thousands of concerts in my life. And we'll get into that later. But that festival was a pretty high, like I'd call it like a buy-in to like get it. Like this is like, so we're in the desert, like north of Los Angeles. There's like glamping, but literally the pool that you talk about is a shipping container that has like a glass cutout in the middle of the desert. People are in various states of undress most of the weekend. There's literally like, there's tits flying all over. There's like me and like I think I was wearing like really tight shorts, like doing jobs. Like it's like to walk into that environment must be really intimidating. So what, like in that first 24 hours, what did you like? What was going through your head during that time?
Oh, that's a great question. I jumped on this very last minute. Like I had a lot of friends. I knew about the festival when it first was like presented, and like there was this whole like they had like layers of who could get invited. They wanted to really curate and make sure like the people were there for the right reasons, and I love that aspect of it. And honestly, I had never been to something like this before. So when I first heard about it, I was like, in the middle of a desert, I need to bring a tent. It's hot. There's like a couple pictures of what it looks like. It looks dope, but I'm just like, this is not my vibe. Like, I'm not going to this. And I didn't buy a ticket. Then it's about 5 to 6 days before, and my roommate Dan is pressing me, and he's like, why are you not going to this? And I was like, I don't know. And he's just like, he's got pressing me. My whole philosophy of 2021 was like be open to everything, attached to nothing, and really was all about experiences. So I finally committed. I walk into this not knowing what I was going to get into, and I can honestly say, Evan, it was one of the most beautiful experiences I've ever been a part of, where I truthfully felt like when people were checking in, and I've told this many times to people when I talk about the festival, I felt like people were checking their identity and their egos behind them. Not saying they had bad identities or bad egos, but it was purely just like a space for people to just be present. We didn't have there was really no good service. You weren't looking at your phone all the time. And it really was just a moment to like drop in with people, and like you would just, especially, being somebody who's in the podcast space, I feel fortunate. I drop into some really deep convos on a weekly basis, but to be in person with some of these people I'm meeting for the first time, and to me, like, like, what's your intention for this year? Or what made you come to this? Or just really caring and asking you these questions. It really was just such a beautiful experience. And it gave me a taste of like, almost that world exists, the Burning Man world, like these festivals. I honestly, Evan, I did not know. I knew of it. I knew it existed, but I didn't really understand it until I got to be part of something such a small scale. And I was like, I get it. Everyone's here as one. People are bringing their expertise in there and what they have to offer. And it's just purely like, I'm here, you're here. How can we be of help to each other?
Yeah. I love that. You mentioned a couple things that resonate, just like the vibe. What is your vibe versus not your vibe? And one of the things I do, I talk about, as people are like, what is a party coach? I talk about that I train vibe curators. So what I mean, it sounds a little pretentious when you first say it, but when you think about, those times of like when you might be feeling socially anxious, or hey, like I'm really not into that, or this isn't what I want to be. That's okay. It's great. It's good to know things about yourself. But a vibe curator is somebody that can even step outside of that comfort zone, or to step into an arena like that and find what still resonates with them. And you talked about these deep conversations that you're able to drop in the podcast space. I have decent memories from that weekend of some of those deep conversations that I heard you engaging with. And I believe we had some of those as well. And that I immediately got that as a vibe that was authentic to you. And so I could already sense what was authentic to you in that space. And you don't have to be up on a shipping container dancing your ass off to be a vibe curator. What you're bringing to the vibe is what you've already practiced and what is true to yourself, which is bringing people into this space to drop in, stay dialed in to that authentic self. However, I think when people go into environments like that, we are not taught to necessarily bring that. We are taught to just blend in or just like be what these other people expect us to be. And I love going to like ultra music festival and like and those big EDM festivals, which in a lot of ways you can be your fully authentic self, but at the same time too, you'll notice everyone starts to wear neon, or everyone is starting to, has to be at the main stage for this type of thing. And there's an art, not a science, but after some time, the intentions of why a lot of people are at those festivals, or why we're going to a bar on a weekend, why you're going to the nightclub, why you're doing these types of things, those intentions start to filter away. And we get closer to like, I'm looking for validation. I'm looking to make up the gap between the expectations that I have for myself and the imagined expectations that we have of that room that we step into. So the hypothesis that I have for this work, and why I think it's important that people start to be more intentional about why they party, is, I want to get into sort of what your journey on this has been, but I notice when I look back onto a lot of my 20s, the rituals that I was going through, the pregame to the, to doing a certain type, like you do this drug at this time, and then you take these shots at this time, started from a place of like, oh, cool, like I want to bond with my bros, or I want to do these types of things. But then it becomes this autopilot where the intention fades away, and it just becomes this dopamine hit, sort of safe place to be, where you're just trying to match whatever one else is around you without giving some truer thought to sort of who you get to be. And I've experienced a lot of friends, and I've had friendships won and lost over people that can't get themselves out of those patterns. And whether it's addiction, whether it is inauthenticity, I want to talk about toxic positivity and the idea of, when we're especially in LA, we're expected to be positive all the time, how that's actually more toxic sometimes than just like being your full self. And coming out of this pandemic, man, like how we spend our time, maybe the old way, like maybe 40 hours in an office every week, we figured out, hey, maybe that wasn't necessary, And I think people are starting to wake up and look around, and they say, hey, maybe starting every Friday at 3 p.m. with a happy hour to this bar, to a club, and to this, and then repeating the same thing every weekend after weekend. If that's working for you, great. It worked for me for a long time. But if it's not working for you, maybe we can start to bring some intention, the same intention that went into that festival that brought us two together to create those vibes and have them mesh together. How can we create more experiences like that so the return on your social investment goes up instead of in this middle ground?
Yeah, you're hitting so many things that we need to peel back so many layers. Let me give you some context, at least as we go through this, to where I'm at, right? I'm 28 years young. I very much, up until 22, was very much living that like Friday afternoon comes, let's grab early drinks and some dinner around 5 or 6. Then we have a pregame, and then we go out, and maybe there's like something in the after hours, and it just rolls through till late in the night. You wake up, you kind of get your shit together early Saturday. Sometimes you might hit like a day bender starting at noon, and then it kind of carries through. I've been there. I've done it. I can't say I regret it, because I enjoyed the moments. But once I woke up to when I graduated college at 22, not knowing what I wanted to do next, kind of dipping my toes in the podcast space, and really having to build my career from zero, I kind of just started wiping out things that were bringing value to my life. And so that was one of the things that kind of went immediately for, I'd say I graduated in May of 2016. So I was about 22 and a half, right? Whatever. Up until I was about 26, 27. That was right when the pandemic was kind of hitting. I wasn't having that social life that I was leaning on in college. And through it, it taught me that I don't need that. And what is the true intention? So even last year was a big year for me. It was a lot of experiences, a good amount of partying and trying things that I've never tried. Definitely a lot of like experiences within drugs. I'm like very intentional about it. And I'd say like now I'm in a space of like when I went into this year, 2022, is being even more intentional, more specifically about like all that, like drugs and alcohol. Like, am I just doing this because it's like casual and we're, at a dinner and like I have to do it? Or, like I went clean the entire month of January so that when we finished the marathon, it was like, let's celebrate. And for 2 days, we didn't even like bend it. Like once you go so long without it, you have a couple of drinks, you're like, this is good, but like, I don't want to hurt myself, So that's at least context to where I'm at. Like I'm very much, and I feel very fortunate. I think I was having a conversation literally last night with my cousin who's about to be 30, and he's now starting to have these like self-awareness. Like, dude, he told me literally last night, he's like, I just got off this weekend bender where I felt like I was in college again. It was great. There was 40 of us out in the mountains staying in a cabin, but like, I just woke up Monday morning. I was just like, I can't keep doing this. Like I felt like shit. Tuesday, I feel a little bit better. He's probably now Wednesday feeling his best self. And so I just value my time. There's so much I want to do. There's so much I want to create. And I know that if I try to live that lifestyle, I'm only going to hurt myself in these other areas. So that's kind of where I'm at, to give you a little bit of context to kind of where I'm sitting at for.
First of all, congrats on the dry January. It's huge. It feels so good.
January 2nd to 29th. So not the full January, but.
Yeah. Listen, so one of the things I do is I host free like dry months every month. So I hosted a dry January month on Discord and had people sort of come in, and we have a little format we do where every day people are invited to share just 3 things they're grateful for and what's one thing they're going to do today instead of drinking. So we try not to talk about. So one of the things that I think is really important, I loved what you said, is you eliminate things that don't bring you value, but I could hear very much that you were building things outside of that. I think one of the challenges that a lot of people face, and I faced, is, whenever I wanted to regulate or moderate my drinking, it was so focused on the like, okay, I'm going to control this, and how do I do, like, what do I take away? Instead of just being like, what are you grateful for that you have right now? And what are you building in that space? So when I host when I host these months and things like that, the first piece of success that I give to everyone is like, you will be successful if you think about this as not eliminating something that you love, but building something new in that place. And what are you creating and building something big in that? And you can do that. Like, you need a community around you to do that. If you try to do that on your own or try to do that solo, it's pretty tough. But having a little couple people in there, like I'm gonna like get emotional talking about it, but we did like a little sort of end of the month recap last week, and this girl was talking about how she, had started to feel like a little bit sicker with drinking and things like that in certain ways, and like had thought about it, but like on her own, but like felt guilty talking about it with her friends. And she was like, Evan, when you like invited me into this group, like it gave me finally a space where I didn't feel judged to like want to have this in my life. But more than that, it gave me a way to like plan things on the weekend. So a big thing we do is think about, okay, like what are you going to put in your space this weekend, right? So we get together on Wednesdays, and this is like as a party coach, what I'm doing is essentially like building a team, right? So I'm not like telling you what to do, but I'm saying like, hey, we're going to all go out like on the field this weekend. Like, how are we best going to do that together? Getting a team of like-minded people together and say, okay, like you love yoga. Like, how can you like build yoga into this weekend routine for you? Hey, you love getting people together. What if instead of like asking for that happy hour on Saturday, you're hosting like a painting day at your apartment, right? Or just, but it's creating in that space instead of taking stuff away. And to hear this woman talk about all the amazing stuff that she created in that last month. There was fitness, she adopted a dog, and like all these things that she'd been wanting to do, but had delayed because alcohol or those things always took priority or became the ritual that had been happening for 5 years. Finally, that was able to let go because we created a team where that was possible. So I think that's like a really important thing to think about is like, what team are you putting yourself on? If you're putting yourself on the same team that's going out with the same plays every weekend before, you're probably going to experience the same results over and over.
Yeah, your environment plays such a role. Yeah. I'm reading a book right now called Atomic Habits, and it talks about how your environment plays such a role on what your habits are. And just kind of going off of that, like, I think the better way to look at it is it's not like what am I missing out because I'm not drinking? It's what am I able to gain? So immediately what helps me kind of go through these sober weekends is like the amount of time that I'm getting back to then, which then allows me to do all these other things, whether it's fitness classes, whether it's like working on creative stuff. It's a no-brainer to me because I see how much more I can gain from my weekend because I'm carving out space and time to make sure that I'm actually fully present and I'm not laying in my bed hungover till 11 a.m. Then I have a foggy brain because I'm, still catching up from the night before. And we oftentimes just associate where going out is the only way to meet people or to find like a potential person we're interested in, when that's just one of many ways to do it. Like there are many of other ways to meet new people and to spend your Friday night. Like, once again, I don't want to sound like a hypocrite because if you follow me on social media, you know that I pick my pockets of when I send it. But even then, Evan, like, there was one time a couple months ago, I'd posted something. I was like in a club and I'm like, the caption was 100% sober and I was dancing my ass off. And the thing is, I was 100% sober. And I think people, because they were chiming in with crying emojis, they thought I was hammered, putting that up as like a joke of like, yeah, I'm hammered at the club. But people just don't get like, I have, and you can build it. I don't want to seem like, as clearly you've done it too, you can build these disciplines where I do not, I used, when I first was like going out sober, I was like, this is weird. I don't know if I can do this, but you can 100% go out, have a good time, not drink, and be fine. And if the people around you are judging you for it, honest to God, that is just a red flag. That are these truly people you want to be around, or are they just people that you're surrounded by because of a liquor or because of a drug and a nightlife? But it's and I know you've done it, but like when you can really step into that discipline of like, I'm not going to drink, I'm not going to do any of these drugs, I'm going to go out and have a good time. It's fucking great. And honestly, the first 2 hours is like when everyone's getting hammered, you kind of feel like you missed out. Hour 3, when they're really feeling good, you're like, I feel better because I'm going to wake up with no hangover.
Yeah. So a couple things. One, that feeling, man. So the best week of my life was I went to Burning Man in 2018, completely sober.
How many times you been to Burning Man?
4 times.
You went 2018 fully sober.
I went fully sober. So I was doing a year. Days. So and again, I don't want to get too much in the story, but at that point in my life, I actually really did need help. I was not, I went into recovery. I went into AA for a while. Actually, so today is my 5-year anniversary of being in LA. And the way I actually got here was Burning Man 2 years prior. Or no, in 2016 when I went, was at probably one of the lower parts of my life. I was partying a lot in New York. I felt like my purpose was to party. Like everyone told me, like, you're so good at this. You make me feel like what you saw me on the dance floor, being that person. I love to be that person, but to be that consistently, I got addicted to that feeling. And therefore, the booze and the coke and like the endless weekends doing that, like, that became who I was, right? And yes, it was fulfilling and I was happy, but I was starting to have panic attacks in the subway. I was just not feeling connected to a purpose. But during that Burning Man, sorry, my voice is coming a little off here.
You're good, you're good. H2O, baby.
It was this run that I did this morning that Drew inspired me on. Anyway, I had been partying for a couple of days. On a Friday night, somebody gave me a drip of this blue acid. And I was like, great, this looks amazing. I take this. I like look over at my friend. She's really tall. She has this umbrella and she was spinning it. I was like, I need to see that. So I took it and I found that this umbrella could control time. And so I zoomed forward into my trip and I saw the very end of it where I was like royally like on the ground. I was like, oh crap. So I tried to go backwards. I scrolled too far backwards in time. This is how we know that this was. I was like, nope. I come back to the second. But when I got back, I realized I couldn't talk. And so for the next 12 hours, I was completely mute. And people were just like holding my hand and like pulling me around Burning Man. And I just had these visions and people were taking pictures on my phone of me just like looking. But in that space in the morning, sunrise is my favorite part of Burning Man. There's these sunrise parties and these big art cars. Robot Heart is out there. It's one of my favorite places in the world. But by the time I reached there, all I could feel and see around me was all the negative energy. And I could feel other people around me that were miserable, that were not being their authentic selves, that were using drugs in ways where they were trying to manipulate each other. And there was a lot of bad energy that I was feeling. I eventually wake up from that, and I had this vision of sitting on the beach in Santa Monica, radiating happiness. And I had never really been there before. I'd seen pictures before, but I have this vision. So I go over to my friend. Somehow I was like, I need to move to LA. And he was like, okay, you owe me $1,000 if you don't do it by January. So I zoomed back. I was in Cleveland at the time. I sold everything, got my Honda Civic, and drove out here. And I made it here by February 1st, 2017. And spent my first night here. This morning, I took this run 6 miles out past the Santa Monica Pier, and I came back and I looked at the spot that I had in my vision, and I stood there today, and I just looked up at the sun, and the happiness that I have, that I've been able to create in this space, came from following that weird freaking dark intuition that I had. But for anyone else that's out there that's like, hey, if you have that gut feeling, or you have something that you feel that's bigger than you, that's pulling you towards something, it can be the scariest thing in the world to say no to all of the things that you have and the things you've been building. But I've never once regretted making those big decisions and taking those big risks, because something bigger than you is pulling you towards something that's going to make you really uncomfortable. And my first year here was miserable. I was not making the right friends. I was partying even harder, just really going deep in a lot of dark areas. But coming out of that, I joined a CrossFit gym, and some guys there took me under their wing, and I kept showing up hungover and crappy into these workouts, but people took me under their wing, and a lot of people took their time out of their life to coach me or to mentor me and to show me a different way as possible. And so the question I want to turn back to you, turning all this around, is, how do you feel like you were able to start to create some of this, say no to those things for yourself? Because I find a lot of content cringy, or the ways that people that preach about this stuff, I don't think at 25 I would have found a lot of this stuff very interesting and compelling, or I'm like, screw those, screw that life, those hippie LA people, I'm having fun, ripping lines in the VIP room in Brooklyn. What the hell are you doing out there? I don't know how I would have communicated effectively to myself at that age. But what I think you're doing a pretty good job, but what really my goal, if I succeed at what I'm doing, is I can still find a level of connection with that person, and could be like, hey, you don't have to go all or nothing here, but bring some intention into it. So I guess my question is, what content, or what personal development content makes you cringe, and how do you sort of navigate that space and communicate?
It's great. It's a great question. It's you don't really understand. There's a great Steve Jobs quote. You can only connect the dots looking. You can't connect the dots looking forward. You can only connect them looking backwards, right? And so, to make a long story short, graduating college, going to a top business school, thinking I was going to, work in the corporate world. It's a big finance accounting school. I graduate, realized that's not what I wanted to do. Start a podcast. I'm driving Uber full time. I spent 3.5 years building my career while driving Uber, paying college loans and all these other bills. And a lot of the money to be made for Uber was the weekends when people are out and about. And so I had to sacrifice early on to build my career, right? But because of that, I had to learn how to say no. And so I started building boundaries. It was if I commit to going to this coffee date with X person for whatever reason, I'm missing out on money I could have made driving Uber. On top of that, I'm spending money. So what's the opportunity cost? So I started analyzing every single opportunity as what's the dollar sign of lost money. Also with that, through this period of time, as I'm trying to figure out what is my passion, what I want to do after college, I'm diving headfirst into self-development. I'm listening to Lewis Howes' podcast. I'm the School of Greatness, listening to Jay Shetty's stuff. I'm listening and consuming Gary Vee's content. I'm just consuming. And I don't know what is right and what is wrong, but I'm seeing a common theme in these successful people. And so to me, even today, where I'm at as a creator, I always tell people, I don't have the answers. this is all I'm sharing with you is my own experience and my own learning. I'm not here to tell you how to live your life. I can only show and share you how I've decided to live mine. I feel very, very fortunate that I feel like when I turned 22, I started to become woke. I started to wake up to like, you're going to fucking die someday. This time is ticking. Like, you can obviously smell the roses and thrive and party and have a good time, but also like, what's the purpose? What do you want to do? Right. So I think it's just been an evolution of just like being very aware of how do I want to impact people? What's the type of like energy I want to give off to the world, and just getting clear, constantly it changing, but like, what is the true north? What am I trying to accomplish? I think I was very fortunate growing up. Like, you know, I was lucky that my parents put a roof over our head. There was food always on the table. I grew up with a younger sister, but it was, you know, we'll give you your basic necessities, but if you want anything else, you're going to have to work for it. And so from a very young age, I had that work ethic. So I'm just the product of my own past. And I just feel very fortunate because, you know, I just know what I fucking want. I know where I want to go. And I'm my own biggest critic. I have been since I was a kid. So like, if I oversend it, which I do sometimes, I love the whole philosophy of like full send. Yeah. There's times when I do, then I wake up Sunday and I'm like, fuck, I could have made use of these last 2 days. Now I'm not going to be able to do it. And then I'll just, you know, hit the reset button and try to do better. And we're always learning. We're always trying to grow. We're human. We're supposed to make mistakes. It's just, how do you take those mistakes? How do you learn from them? And do you make the proper changes moving forward? So still to this day, like I said, I'm reading a book called Atomic Habits. I'm always trying to study and learn. And to answer the last part of the question, like, you can just tell through the way, I think we both are very much people. Like that's our skill. We can read people, and I can just tell when something's not authentic and when it is. And so the stuff that's authentic really stands out to me. And if it's not, then I kind of just push it off. So that's just a really, and at least in the productivity world, or not the productivity, but the personal development, you want to hear some real shit. And I was writing about it today, actually, of like how grateful I am that I had to spend, 3.5 years driving Uber full time to drive 19,002 rides to get me to where I am today, because that's part of my story. I wasn't given anything. I've worked for everything. So I hope that kind of answers it. That was kind of a tangent, but that's kind of where my head's at.
Yeah. I love that. The concept of like just regrets and mistakes and sort of how do we get to pivot through things, full send, et cetera, just really resonates with me and what I want to create in the world as well. Because going back to what we just opened up with, right? Like some of my happiest, best moments are in those like tribal full send moments, right? And like for when other people would look at certain areas of my life, I think they would be like, yo, you're nuts. Like, this is crazy. This is not fun to me, or this would not be fun to me. And that's okay. But encouraging people to still find that intention and be honest with themselves about if this really truly is fun for you, like you can build a way that you can still experience that and still be productive and still be all of these types of things, right? And I think a little bit of my frustration and why I want to do what I do, I sort of practice and preach. I practice and inspire people to think about it in terms of like short-term sobriety, right? Mm-hmm. So if the idea of like, hey, like I don't want to, like I'm not liking how I'm feeling in this way, like right now, basically out there is like, you can either say like identify as an addict and go, and you can find help, and there's amazing, beautiful, great help for you there. And I am not qualified nor interested in diagnosing addiction or talking about it. I can, but that is not my specialty, and I'm not qualified to talk in that space. What I'm qualified as a coach is to ask questions and just get you thinking about what those intentions are. So right behind me here, like my banner says, why do you party? After a weekend of party, do you feel burnout, anxious, lonely? It doesn't have to be like this. So that question of asking people, like I'll go out and I just ask people like, why do you party? 80% of people don't have an answer, right? Or they haven't really thought about it very much. And I think a lot of I can't remember who said it, what's biologist, but like nature abhors a vacuum, right? Like whenever there's a vacuum, it's going to be filled with something. And oftentimes like partying or these types of things it's because there's a vacuum, we're going to fill it with whatever that thing is. But intentions, and what we felt at that Mycelium festival was a festival filled with intentions. A lot of people had put work and time and effort into thinking about how are you going to feel on this day and this time, and being inside of that structure is actually gives you the freedom to be so many different types of things. But simply like walking into a vacuum of, an empty Friday and Saturday night can be really fun and exciting, but perhaps after some time is going to start to, be filled with more toxic things or not your true self.
What's the first step for people that are feeling that? They're feeling anxious, they're feeling overwhelmed, they're waking up Sunday, they have this like huge amount of like pressure on their shoulders because they're thinking about the amount of money they've spent, potentially the bad decisions they've made, the things that they did that they didn't necessarily want to do, the things they might have said that they never would have said. Quick break from today's episode and then we'll get right back to it. Today's episode is brought to you by the Stay Dialed In app. Have you guys and gals downloaded the app? I don't think you've done so today. You need to head over to your local app store that's either on your iPhone or Google and search Stay Dialed In app. It is free to download. It is going to be your biggest accountability community for 2022 and beyond. This app is full of members there to support you in any aspect of your life, whether it's dating, whether it's career building, whether it's passion projects, life experiences, health and wellness, mental health, you name it. This community is there to support you. To download the app, it is free. That'll give you just access to our notification board with daily notifications going to your phone to help you become the best version of yourself. There's also a photo section. We'll just have that has a bunch of photos to help inspire you in your day to day. There is, however, a paywall of $4.99 per month, which I was trying to keep at a reasonable price, a cup of coffee in any major city. And that's going to give you access to the actual community and all these different discussion boards, as well as private videos and podcasts. And it's something that I'm really excited about moving forward. So if it's of interest at all to you, head over to join.staydialedin.com to at least learn more about what the paywall is and what you can expect in the actual app. Or you can just download it today. So join.staydialedin.com, your biggest accountability community for 2022 and beyond. The link is in the description below of this episode to check it out. And I hope you guys and gals enjoy it. So stay dialed in, keep getting after it. Let's get back to today's episode. It can be very overwhelming, and I've had plenty of those fucking weekends, and it's just not ideal. So what advice do you give to people on, if you feel like this, what's the first step? Because it's overwhelming, and there's no just hit a refresh button and everything changes overnight. It's really a game of taking these small daily steps.
Yeah, great question. So first, and if you're listening to this, be compassionate to yourself. You're not a bad person because of this. You're not doomed. Like there's probably not something inherently wrong with you. You have been trained and conditioned by everything that feels good around you. You're chasing what used to feel good and what used to make you feel good. And don't blame yourself for just following what those choices have led you to. The first step is, after that compassion and bringing yourself to that, is say, well, what do I really want to build? What's something that excites me outside of this? And maybe that's a hobby, maybe that's a friendship, maybe that's a relationship. I encourage people maybe not to think too much about like, I want to like find the love of my life or something around that. That's maybe a little bit too much, but like, what is something that is actually achievable in like 1 to 3 months that you can start to build in that place? And from there, I do a lot of this in the morning coaching that I do with people, is I provide accountability for people to say, hey, I really want to be a video creator, right? And I was like, well, okay, great. What have you done over the past like 3 months? It was like, well, like I edit this video and I put it out and then whatever. I was like, what are you doing every single day that you're a professional in this? Like, what is your output in this? What are you actually building? What is your affirmation? What do you say to yourself that says, I am this thing? Because like it or not, even if you're not saying it out loud, if every weekend or not even every weekend, but if you have the time to fill and you're like pregame to bar to this, like you're essentially saying an affirmation in your head of saying like, this is what I value. This is what I'm spending my time in. Right. Mm-hmm. So starting to take your subconscious and make it conscious is what that's going to be. So to be really clear on this, compassion, and then find something that you want to build and start to spend, how are you going to spend the next 1 to 3 months building whatever that thing is, and start to focus on that. What are you doing on a daily basis? And chances are you're going to want accountability on that. So part 3 is find a friend, find a family. One of the first things I did when I wanted to get sober is somebody gave me this advice. One of the best pieces of advice I ever did. They said, write an email, say what's working, what's not working for you, be really honest, and send it to the 10 closest people in your life and say, I need your accountability on this. Wow. And when I had to write that letter, I still have that email and I go back and look at it sometimes. I was in such a dark place and I couldn't even be fully honest, but the letters that I got back from people in my life that said, Evan, like, we love you so much. And like, this is maybe not, they didn't even see the pain that I was in. Like, they just saw this as sort of who I was, but they were like, we would love to be accountable to you to this. And knowing that you don't have to do this alone. There's people, no matter who you are, there's a couple people. If you don't have 10, send it to 2, but find somebody outside of yourself to bring into this, because if you try to do this all yourself, you will, there's another quote that I love is, we do not rise to the level of our expectations. We fall to the level of our training. And the training that we get and we do almost never happens alone, right? You have mentors, you have people that are showing you how to do these things. The reason we have great coaches is because they train us. They show us possibilities that we can be better versions of ourselves. And when you step out on that field on Friday night and the lights go up, you're not going to live up to your expectations. That fear, that adrenaline, that other team, you're going to go to the lowest level of what your training has prepared you for. And if you want to be a better partier and you want to show up as a better person on the dance floor, with your friends, with potential lovers, you are always going to fall to the level of your training. And if your training says that all you're worth is what you can do with a couple shots in you, or rip a couple lines, and that's who you get to become in that space, you will always maintain at that level. So how can you find some training around that and bring some other people into it? Yeah,
I literally 20 minutes before we jumped on this podcast, I put out a TikTok video about the importance of accountability communities, whether it's fitness, whether it's dating, whether it is life experiences, like having people that you can use each other to hold yourselves accountable is absolutely crucial. Even as somebody where it has taken years, but I've built a very, very strong discipline in myself where when I say I want to do something, I fucking do it, and I don't allow myself to steer away. Even as somebody who's really built a lot of discipline in himself and really is his biggest critic and will pound away in his mind if he doesn't follow what he said he was going to do, it is valuable that I share these wants and desires with my roommates or friends of mine, because they do hold me accountable and they can see things from a different perspective, an outside looking perspective, which then actually helps you, stay clear to what you're trying to work towards. This entire show, Evan, is about helping people reach their inner potential, right? Mm-hmm. And that's what got me so excited about having you on today, because you are literally becoming like, I just see like what you are creating and what you're offering to the world. And I think this is like such a valuable like area of our lives that we don't really talk about, because we always put career first or relationships, and like partying is, I think it's just like, yeah, we party, like it's kind of on the side. But how, when done correctly, when balanced correctly, how does partying actually help us reach our inner potential? What are the benefits and values that you've seen in your own life by partying more strategically and more from a more mindful and intentful standpoint?
What a great question. And what's coming to mind a little bit for me right now is I actually had a TikTok that my most viral TikTok I talked about, hey, I posed the question, like, is partying every night in your 20s worth it? Right? Pose the question. And everyone expects like the next thing to be like, no, like be disciplined or whatever. And I was like, it was worth it for me. Like I would not have changed it. I don't have regrets. I guess I spent a lot of times in mental health issues and I was chasing things and doing the wrong things. But I was really lucky early on in my life. And we talked about parents, like my parents and the people around me trained me to invest in my community and in people around me and to be curious about what other people are doing and show up for them. So all that time when I was out on dance floors, and I was at a bar or club or festival every weekend for 15 years. Like I did not take weekends off. Like that's what I was doing. But like I was investing in a community that has shown up for me in ways that I never could have imagined. And when I've needed help, or when I've maybe haven't been successful in business, or I haven't been successful in my relationships, or I haven't been successful in my own partying, the same people that I was out doing those things with have been on different types of journeys. I went to a wedding this last year, and one of my buddies has stopped drinking like 3 years before, and has just sort of been on this journey and really inspired me to like reevaluate and sort of drop back into the success that he was seeing. We had the opportunity to host a bachelor ceremony instead of a bachelor party. So what we did was go out. We got we have a friend who has a house in Palm Springs. It's a beautiful center for healing, but essentially did like a sweat lodge on Friday night. So we did a no booze bachelor party. We did like heat and cold on Friday night. And one of the cool things that we did is we talked about in the sweat lodge, you introduce yourself. Who are your parents? Who are your grandparents? And you sort of introduce what everyone did. And some of these guys that I've known forever, like hearing where they come from and what it means to them, I'm like about to get emotional again. But it's like we've known some of our friends for our whole lives and we don't talk about that stuff, right? But like to have that opportunity, and then the next night, like, you know, going into like different types of ceremonies, like we left on that Sunday and everyone was clear-eyed, clear-eyed heart, no booze, can't lose. Like getting on those planes home and thinking like, I've been to how many dozen bachelor parties, and like they're fun and I have a blast, and I would not have changed them. But if I knew that this was possible, that I could feel like this on the other side of it, you know, it would have been really cool to drop into some of those as options. So yeah, man, I think I lost the thread a little bit there, but these things are so like it's really cool and possible once you see that's there, and the accountability of investing in those things when you're out partying it can pay back tenfold, right? You can bank again. Oh, sorry. And this is the last little piece of this. So I mentioned that like I did put myself in slight opposition to. I have a lot of friends that I went to school where a lot of people did the banking and lawyers, and they're at Goldman Sachs, and they did that work, and they've been sitting in front of a computer screen till 11 o'clock p.m. every night of their whole 20s, right? And yes, they're sitting on piles of cash, and they have a house in the Hamptons. They will never get those years back. Like when in your 20s, like how you party and how you're able to be and show up on the dance floor with less hangovers and less things at 35 right now, it's just a fact. I can't exactly do what I did before. Although people would be surprised. I'm still out there. I'm still raging and I'm still doing it. I can still turn up as much as anyone. But the nature of just like aging in your body means you do it in a different way. And again, I hate to say like, yes, there's a balance in here, but like, I've always wanted to invest in memories and experiences. And now that I have a wide network, if I can go to any city in the world and know that there's 10 people there who I can crash on their couch if everything falls apart for me, that's worth more to me than a fatty, a Roth IRA or whatever house that is. So that stuff will come when it comes. But like, I think people sometimes get a little bit too focused on like grind and forget that you get a chance to make memories and connect with people along the way.
Yeah, you got to live. I think what's going to be so impactful about this conversation, Evan, is, to be straight, like we only know what we know. And if people only know, like, because of the commute, once again, environment plays such a huge role. If all they know is to go out on the weekends and have fun and rage and party, that's all they know. And like staying in on a Friday night just doesn't seem like part of the equation. But it's not until you hear somebody's perspective like yours, who's done so much deep work, who's seen the pros and cons of both lifestyles, that it's then going to allow them to go, wait a second, I never thought of it like this. Like, I didn't know I could go out sober. I didn't know that I could take these short-term periods of my life and just go sober. So I think it's like, sometimes it's hearing it from somebody else, which then allows somebody to give themselves that permission. Like, I do want to like take a break and I do want to enjoy myself. And there is that balance where it's like, you can you can live your life, go out and have fun. You just don't need to associate like I need to be ripping shots of tequila every hour because I'm out and about. Mm-hmm. You mentioned earlier on in the podcast, and we didn't really get to dive into it, but I'd love for you to elaborate on like what social ROI is. Like, I think even when we were on a run, we were talking about like you've had, I think clients were like, they're going out, they're spending all this money, and they're waking up the next day and they're just like feeling empty. They're not fulfilled. They had a one night stand, but it never goes anywhere else because it's just like the environment they put themselves in is the expectation. Then that's what happened. One night stands, lots of money gets spent, and you feel empty the next day. Can you kind of talk about what social ROI is?
Yeah. So I think it's in some ways it's a really old concept, but in a lot of ways it's fairly new. And actually on my TikTok right now, I have a little link. People can just come and book time to sort of talk and see if they're a good fit for the program. And I just talked with somebody right before this podcast today, 22-year-old kid, fraternity, about to graduate, majoring in finance, has said, he's like, I've been watching your TikTok and like wanted to like try to go out sober. He was like, I was actually having a blast. I just never thought about that before. Mm-hmm. And I was like, well, what do you want like out of life? Like, what's a great weekend for you? He's like, I haven't really thought about it. I was like, well, listen, you're a finance major, right? You're trained to think about margins. You're trained to think about compound interest, right? Like, how do we invest in those types of things? Like, how do so many people, and we've spent so much time, energy, and money. I've spent no doubt hundreds of thousands of dollars on booze over the years. Like not regretting it, but like not really thinking very much about it until recently. But like, was I always getting something out of that? And sometimes I am, and sometimes I'm not. But if we can bring more awareness so what I do with clients is, one of the things I'll have them do is think about the quantitative and the qualitative ways that they're going to get out of their weekend, right? So like, think of your inputs. Your inputs are the money you're spending, the time you're spending, and the energy essentially that you're spending. Your outputs on the other side is, what are your general, like, how did you feel during it? Like, is there a number that you could put on it? Like, yes, this last night was a movie, bro. That's one thing. But also, like, how do you feel on Monday? Are you engaged? Are you excited? Did you have that hookup that you really wanted to? Did you meet somebody that you can have a second date on? Did you invest in somebody in your community that you believe 5 years down the road is going to be somebody really valuable to have in your network? And just start to bring some awareness around those types of things on a weekend. And what people are starting to see is, just with slight more thoughts and intentions around those, our marginal returns can skyrocket. Right. Mm. But oftentimes we just are not even taking the time to think about them. And probably you're not going to be able to do it alone. And to have a group and a community and to have a coach who's thought through this stuff before could be really valuable to presence some of those things that are in your head. Yeah. Yeah. It's so good, man. It really is. It puts everything into perspective when you start to just be more aware of like how these decisions really impact our lives. And in the moment, it might seem like it's just one weekend here, it's just one weekend there, but it compounds. It really does add up. And, finding those things that we really value and instead of just making it a Monday through Friday thing, making it a Saturday through Sunday. And I will say the biggest difference that I was feeling even while prioritizing not doing any booze during January was like, I just felt like the same level of energy every single day. And it doesn't mean that Saturday and Sunday you have to, make use of every single second, every minute, but 4 hours of work on a Saturday, 4 hours of work on a Sunday, that's 8 hours. You times that by 4 in a month, that's 32 hours of extra work for everything I want to do, times that by the year, that adds up. And then on top of like how it benefits your health, your pockets of your money, it really goes a long way for just the amount of benefits you can feel and see by making these short-term decisions of like, just
look at it the short term. Don't think about, I need to cut it out for the year, but just small micro steps that eventually will add up to something big. And that's something you're doing right now. I believe 2022, you said, no, you're going sober the entire year.
I've committed to 2022, no booze or synthetic drugs. I think mushrooms will remain on the table. It's called California sober, which is, all natural, baby. But with that, there was a couple things. One, I was just noticing, again, that energy levels. Last year, I actually did an experiment where I literally tracked every day that I drank or not drank. And I had every day that I did, I would give $5 to charity as just sort of a thing around that. But I think I made it, it was like over 310 days or something. It was like almost 90% of days I was not drinking. But even with that little bit of time, I was like, what am I really getting out of this? Just wanted to sort of see what could happen in a full year of that. But also from a branding perspective, full disclosure, I want to brand myself as hey, it's possible to be the sober festival guy. I'm pitching a bunch of music festivals right now and brands and being send me to a music festival. I will rage hard. That feeling that you had in the club of sober, you should see me fully sober with a girl on my shoulders, dancing as hard as anyone else on the front row at 35 years old. That's the power you have when you are comfortable with yourself and you've done the work to be that. Where a lot of people, they're if I'm saying this and you're listening to this and you're that makes me anxious. I'm excited. I couldn't go do that sober. That's fine to feel that way. But then do you want to spend the rest of your life trapped in that story about yourself that you're not good enough as who you are to show up to experience life? And when I started to think about that in my own life, even though drugs and alcohol have given me so much and I love them and what they have done for me, I also want to experience the full spectrum of this world. And this year in 2022, I've done the work on myself. I'm committed to bringing this work to other people. And that's why I'm so grateful you invited me on this podcast to talk through this, both with you, but also just start to get this message out there. And just hear I know other people are thinking about this stuff. And people are going to poke a lot of holes in my hypocrisy. And I've made so many mistakes and I continue to make mistakes. And I will not be perfect in anything that I do. But I think our best coaches and the people that inspire me the most are the ones that get back up. Persistency is more important than consistency. And I will persistently show up in a way that lets me experience a little bit more of what this world has to offer.
Yeah, we talked about it earlier, man, but it was very clear to me, and I told you this when we went on that run a couple of weeks ago, where I had obviously known and seen kind of what you were trying to do, and I've respected it, but it wasn't until I had a moment to just be with you and hear you talk about it and hear the passion and the why of why you wanted to do this was very authentic to you. And you could tell it came from just a deeper level. It wasn't to make money. It was purely from personal experience. The reason I still create today is because I'm creating for the younger version of myself who wanted and needed this type of content. So I think it's, on top of authenticity in people, it's the why of what they do, I think is just so clear of, are they in their power or are they doing something for the wrong reasons? And so I think you're very much onto something special that a lot of people can and will benefit from. And as long as you stay consistent, as I've believed, the money will come. It will chase you in abundance, because people will need and feel what you have to offer and pull from your experiences. And it excites me to hear even that 22-year-old about to graduate finance is already aware that I need to change. Because I think with, there's a lot of pros and cons to social media. You hear it all day long, but I think the biggest pros is that people are able to tap in to different consciousness and different mindsets that they never would have. If social media didn't exist, he wouldn't be aware that you could do this, because he's only surrounded by his environment and he's only going to become a product of his environment. So I very much think, there are a lot of pros to the social media world, and it's clear that your content is reaching this type of an audience. At this point, we're going to get to the final 5, Evan. These are the last 5 questions. One sentence answer. If you got to go over a little bit, you got my clearance, but try to answer them in one sentence. First question for you. How can people learn to give themselves permission to follow their interests and their ideas?
ask people around you what they believe your unique vibe is.
It's great. It's great. Number 2, if you could go back and tell yourself one piece of advice at any point of your life, what would it be and when?
Right after my mom died, I was 25 and living in New York. I would go back and tell myself, the guilt that you're feeling, your mother absolved you of that. And she told you right to your face that she was proud of you and what you had done. And you don't need to try to chase that away or party that away.
It's beautiful. I want to ask a 2.2 question, because that was something that if we had time, I was going to get into. What do you think the greatest lesson is that you learned from her that you remind yourself of today?
She was a gardener, and she cared a lot about creating abundance and beauty and caring for those things around her. And I have had a long story in my head that I'm not that way. I'm very ADD. I can barely keep my plants alive. But what I've realized is that way of being of maybe plants and physical things, that's maybe not a skill that I have, but I can be a gardener of people and vibes and people around me. And I get to curate and show people and take care of the garden of community that I have around me.
It's beautiful. Question number 3, what's an area of your life you need to put more effort into?
Finances, and getting really clear and authentic about my inputs and outputs in that. Yeah.
It's great. Question number 4, what is the first step anyone can take to reaching their inner potential?
Don't think about potential as one thing, or that you're put on this earth for one thing. You are in a season of your life, and it's okay to, your potential for that day might be to make the best depression mac and cheese that you've ever made. And that is your potential for today. And if you just concentrate on that next right thing of what that potential is, ultimately you will live into a larger potential.
It's great. Potential is all about one step in front of the other. It's always an evolving process. 5th and final question for you. Somebody's listened to the last 59 minutes of this podcast. After they wrap up listening to this podcast, what is one challenge you have for the listener today?
My challenge is undertake over the next couple of weeks a dopamine fast. Try to spend 48 hours, unplug from social, unplug from the news, unplug from your friends, unplug from things around you, and spend time with music or a book, or give yourself a chance to center in. And we're talking about potential. You might, in the quietness of your mind in that place, something beautiful will come up for you.
Yeah, it's so good. I think stillness leads to growth, and sometimes we don't realize that until we have those times to slow down, cut out distractions, and really see what matters most to us. Evan, there are very few people in this world that I've met that genuinely light up a room that they're in, and there is something inside you that is energetic, and that even when I posted yesterday that, looking for questions for this podcast, I had somebody chime in that's a mutual friend of ours, and I'll save their name, but was extremely excited. And they said, that they loved your energy. And anytime I've even brought your name up with my roommates, anybody in general, it is always nothing but positive and uplifting and high frequency. And you bring a lot to the table. And not in the sense of like value, but just like what you have to offer to the world. And it's very genuine. The comment you made about learning the lesson you learned from your mother of like, I feel like you are somebody that we as humans, we're plants, right? We're always growing, we're always evolving, but we need light. right? The sun is great. We live in Southern California. It's fucking fantastic. But there's also people like you that walk around and just are pushing this constant energy and light. Doesn't matter the hour of the day, doesn't matter the day of the week. You're constantly just pushing this around, man. And I just want to acknowledge it and say that just keep this path going. I think you're going to be a pioneer in this party coaching space. I've never seen anybody approach it the way that you're approaching it. And I think just with the combination of authenticity in your why, I think this thing can become anything that you want it to become. And I've been honored to chat with you today. I think you're going to bring so much value to this community, this audience that's listening, that just wants to become the best version of themselves. And I've covered everything: sleep, productivity, dating, every food, health and wellness, everything under the sun. And I have yet to ever cover something specifically in partying. And I don't think there's anybody that could have been better off than you today. So I appreciate you being part of the show, man.
Well, I'm just, again, completely honored to be here with you. And just know that the respect goes back so deeply to you, hearing your story. And I've dropped in to listen to your podcast a couple times when I've been traveling over the past month or two, and other things too. And hearing these stories, but also just knowing the work and the time that you put into creating this, and the discipline that you take. And motivation is not always going to be there. Sometimes the discipline has to replace that. Man, even the past 2 months have been really tough as like a solo entrepreneur. Like, money got really tight, and I'm like in different places with that. But knowing where you built and sort of how you built out of this has inspired me to push through these last couple of months. And in the past week or two, booked more clients than I have in the past many months. Things are blowing up. I did a radio interview yesterday, and I'm doing this. Like, it's all like coming to fruition right now. And I don't think it would have been possible if I would not have reached out to you and went on that run, and you pushed me over that last little edge of believing that, hey, this is really cool and possible. So you are inspiring so many other people. And I love the simplicity of your message, and then being able to come here and talk more complex about what Stay Dialed In is and how to win the morning, win the day. Like, such a beautiful model. And I'm so excited to see the community that you grow, and the people that get plugged into what you're building too.
Thank you, man. It's it's making me feel good, man. It's truly appreciated. And it's just, I hope I can lead by example for others, that it really is as simple as 1 brick a day, 1 small step in front of you every single day, 1% growth per day. It's all these little, in the moment, it feels like nothing, but in time, it will build into something massive. So I really do appreciate that, brother. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to find Evan, head over to Evan's IG, please. First off, before you even head to his IG, I would be so curious to learn and hear what you guys and gals enjoyed about this specific episode. We've never covered partying like this. We have dove into some really serious, personal topics today. Please screenshot this episode on whatever platform you're listening in on, Spotify, iTunes, YouTube, whatever it is. Screenshot it, post it to your story, tag Evan. He's at Evan_Cudworth. That's EVAN_CUW or CUDWORTH. I'll have it linked up in the description below. Also tag me at Bobbbaaaay. That's BO, 3 B's, 4 A's and a Y. Let us know, what was the biggest takeaway? How did this episode change your perspective? How are you going to make changes into how you party? Please, please, please let us know. I'd be so curious to learn. Also linked up below, I will have Evan's TikTok. The best website, is it club7vanpassion.io, or is it your full name website?
The club's the passion.io one, but start at my Instagram and just shoot me messages there. That's the best place. I have a Hoobie link under that, and you can book calendars or my things, everything's there.
I'll take that same link and I'll put it in the description. Perfect. So if you want to find Evan on any of these platforms, it'll be in the link of the description below. Is there anywhere else I should be sending people?
No, I'm so excited to hear what y'all are thinking, and let's all curate our best life.
Bring the vibes, baby. Bring the vibes. Yeah, Evan, appreciate you being on the show, brother.
Thank you.
Ladies and gentlemen, it's the Bearded Man Podcast. See ya.